Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're unpacking a really fascinating and honestly kind of ruthless concept from our source material. It's called the invisible architecture of social value. Basically, it's a deep dive into exactly how we humans unconsciously measure worth in our social and romantic lives. Fair warning, the text leans pretty heavily on a Machiavellian framework. That might sound a little intimidating at first, but really it just dismantles the silent rules of why some people are, magnetically compelling, while others, well, they just kind of fade into the background.
The text sets up a scenario that, let's be real, might feel a bit too familiar. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right? You know the drill. You're being nice, you're putting in consistent effort, you're always there for them. And yet, despite playing perfectly by the rules, you end up feeling completely overlooked. The source validates that exact frustration. It actually suggests that the very actions you think are building your value are the exact things actively destroying it.
To understand why this happens, the source points to a really compelling piece of research. A researcher actually sat down and interviewed over 400 women, and these were women who encountered more men in a single year than most people interact with in a lifetime. So we're talking about a massive, highly experienced sample size here. The whole goal of the study? To pinpoint the exact, clinical moment someone is totally erased from another person's mind and categorized as, basically, zero value.
So the crucial point is that this erasure, it isn't triggered by some loud, dramatic argument, a massive betrayal, or even a sudden glaring mistake. Instead, the source calls it a quiet erasure. This loss of perceived value happens completely silently, on a biological level, long before the other person even consciously realizes they're losing interest. It's all about these subtle, invisible signals we're sending out without even knowing it.
According to this Machiavellian framework, the absolute fastest way to trigger that silent erasure is by broadcasting one specific thing: need. Now, in this context, need isn't about asking a friend for a favor. It's actually a profound biological signal of low value. It essentially tells the world, hey, I lack an internal center and I desperately require someone else's approval just to feel stable. The source makes a really sharp, objective observation here. The second you start outwardly hoping to be selected, you've pretty much signed a biological death sentence for your perceived social worth. No way around it.
So what does this look like in practice? The source material breaks this invisible architecture down into 3 lethal behaviors.
Here's our roadmap for the breakdown. We're going to objectively analyze early emotional overexposure, structural availability, and finally, validation seeking.
Let's start with lethal behavior number 1, early emotional overexposure. Now, modern culture tells us all the time that it's brave to open up super fast, right? To just lay out your entire life story and your deepest traumas right out of the gate. But the source argues the exact opposite. It suggests that when you do this, the unconscious signal the other person receives isn't, wow, how brave. It's actually, this person has absolutely zero other options.
The text looks at this through an almost economic lens. Think about it. Scarcity of demand is what creates perceived value in literally any market, and human relationships are really no different. When you exercise restraint and reveal yourself slowly, you signal that you've got this rich, layered interior life. But desperate availability, giving everything away immediately, that destroys your perceived value, because instead of reading as genuine devotion, it just reads as low status, and honestly, a bit of panic.
Okay, that brings us to the second lethal behavior, structural availability. This goes way beyond just oversharing emotionally. It's about how you literally structure your day-to-day life. It's that habit of rearranging your entire week or dropping whatever you're doing just for the mere possibility of getting a crumb of someone's attention.
The source really leans into Machiavelli on this one. The idea is that a ruler who makes himself too accessible at any given hour destroys his own authority. Think about your text habits. If you reply to a message within seconds, the signal received is that you have no independent direction in life. If you cancel your own plans instantly the moment someone else is suddenly free, the signal is that you lack an internal mission. Put simply, your existence should not hit the pause button just because someone else enters the room.
Moving on to the third and probably the most subtle behavior, validation seeking. This is when you're constantly reaching outward for confirmation that you're enough or that you're safe in a relationship. It's constantly monitoring someone else's mood just to regulate your own. The text explains that fishing for reassurance or constantly over-explaining yourself puts out this highly anxious energy. It's broadcasting to the world that your foundation is just not solid.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept perfectly. Imagine you send a message and it takes them 6 long hours to reply. I mean, we've all been there, right? At minute 1, the message is sent. By hour 3, the silence starts triggering that intense, burning urge to send a follow-up joke or a question, just to manage your own panic. But the text argues the real test is hour 6. Can you sit in that uncertainty without flinching? Because the second you break that silence just to soothe your own anxiety, boom, you've just broadcasted need.
Let's look at another common scenario. Enthusiastically canceling your own personal plans just because someone you're interested in suddenly becomes free. While you might think you're just showing eager affection, what the other person actually registers is your hierarchy of priorities. They see that your own time holds no real weight for you. The source makes this really impartial, hard-hitting assertion. What bends instantly is never what people fight to keep.
Which brings us to a core philosophical pillar of the text. Quote, power, real power, does not ask for permission. True value, as it's described here, is completely self-sustaining. It doesn't flinch or backtrack when it's challenged, and it certainly doesn't over-explain itself just to win favor. It just exists. It's completely grounded in its own authority.
So how do we actually fix this? Well, the source pivots from dismantling the problem to what it calls the real reconstruction. This is a structural framework for actively reclaiming your internal authority.
The text outlines 3 really concrete steps. Step 1. Build a project or craft. You need to literally have somewhere else to be rather than just sitting around refreshing your messages. Step 2. Reclaim your silence. Learn how to sit in your own company without needing constant external noise or validation. And Step 3. Become centered. Let's look a little closer at what that actually means in practice.
To be centered, according to the source material, means that your emotional state originates entirely from within. It doesn't wildly spike or crash depending on how someone else responds to you. And the text is super clear about this. This isn't about putting on some fake, cold, aloof performance. Actually, scratch that. It's not a performance at all. It's about a true, genuine alignment where your external presence perfectly matches the internal authority you've built. You aren't pretending you don't care. You genuinely have a rock-solid foundation that simply cannot be shaken by a slow text reply.
Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how it maps out a total transformation between 2 distinct archetypes. On one side, we have the reactive slave. This is someone who operates entirely from a position of just hoping to be chosen by others. But on the other side, we have the sovereign archetype. This archetype does not wait around to be picked. Instead, they actively evaluate others based on their own rigorous internal standards. And making that shift, it completely changes how you are perceived out in the world.
The text delivers this final, really empowering observation: build in silence, emerge in force. It's essentially a call to step up and author your own mythology, rather than just drifting along and becoming, as the text bluntly puts it, food for the predators. It's all about doing that hard internal work quietly, so that when you finally step into the light, your value speaks entirely for itself.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Are you going to continue operating from a place of simply hoping to be chosen? Or will you build your internal center, evaluate the world on your own terms, and choose with open eyes? It's a pretty powerful framework to consider the very next time you find yourself instinctively reaching for your phone.